Well, hello everyone. So today I have an incredible honor. I am here with Ted and Kath Murray, who also happen to be my dear aunt and uncle. Now, Ted and Kath have a story, a unique story. It's going to be a heartfelt story. They have spent years in community, uh, caring for people, caring for people in loss and grief, and also experiencing it themselves on a personal level. And we are just going to have a fantastic conversation today about about their lives, about the lives of their son Jordy, and about their family and what they have experienced and how they have come to their professional lives and what they've been able to impact in their community. So, welcome, Ted and Kath.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mel.
Good
It's
to
good
be
to be
here.
here.
Yeah, so maybe we'll just start. Maybe we'll go into a little bit about what you guys have created with your business. And for people that are just meeting you, what inspired its creation and how did you start down this road?
So I think I'll take that one, Ted.
Yeah.
I'm a hospice palliative care nurse, and people sometimes ask me how I came to hospice nursing, and I say I came as a child. I was raised through my teens by my aunt, who was the master family caregiver. And during my teens, she cared for family, friends, neighbors, relatives, friends of friends, so that I learned that very solid that I learned that when someone's in need, you respond. And that really set the pace for my life. When I graduated from nursing, she gave me a book about the Black community in BC. Hate to say it, but I never read the book. But the title has always remained with me, and that is Go Do Something Great. And Ted and I married and lived in Salmon Arm and then Lillooet, then Vancouver at UBC, and then came here. And when we came here, I had the opportunity to work with Victoria Hospice, which is a fantastic, fantastic hospice. I felt very honored to be there and started to be involved in education. And by that time, I had cared for my father and my uncle and other family friends, and as a teen had seen death, as a young adult had seen death, and had been there for different people. So I was so fortunate to now receive some formal training, and I so value education, and I also value what in Ontario is called personal support workers, in British Columbia right now, healthcare assistants, and same in Alberta, and some places continuing care aides or assistants, resident care aides. So appreciate their role on the front line, the incredible work they do. So I just developed such a mandate, a personal mission to try and be a drop in the bucket and to make a change in education and help to better prepare these individuals for the care, the incredible care they provide, and the relationships that they hold in the community in particular, but also in the facilities. So one thing led to another, and then I went back and did a master's in thanatology just at the time that Ted was retiring. And then we formed a company called Life and Death Matters, specifically devoted to education resources to help improve care of the dying. And we are still alive in that business today because Ted then focused his professional time on helping to run Life and Death Matters, which has been an incredible labor of love and has been amazing. So, Ted, maybe you'd like to comment from there.
Well, just that I had worked for the government and basically the Ministry of Forest as a recreation forester for about 20 years, and had retired early, and I had done some consulting, and came to the conclusion that it would be better to have one company that was successful rather than two that weren't. And so Kath is very outgoing and connects with people very well. And I was more responsible for uh, getting our books self-published and just that distribution and the keeping track of the finances and making sure that we were still in business down the road so that we could do some of the work that we had wanted to do. So that's sort of it in a nutshell. But
Yeah.
Kath and I sort of work together as co conspirators.
And we raised kids together, and we did that pretty well together. Not sure that I'm not claiming that in terms of our parenting, but the kids are fabulous. But we worked well together raising kids, and so it was great to then. We're so different, so it was great then to be able to apply some of that partnership to life and death matters.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the last 5 years and what you guys have experienced and um, just just what has transpired and then we'll go, Mary. We'll talk a little bit about both of these things in depth more after.
Uh, well, again, 5 years ago, um, actually, it'd be 6 years ago. 6 years
Okay.
ago, January 23rd, that our son Jordy, who was 30 years old, was died in a hunting accident in Alberta, out not too far from you.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was with his friends, and it was an accident that, of course, accidents uh, could be avoided if people were doing everything they're supposed to with the guns. And so, but we have really not held any animosity or any uh, uh, ill feelings towards those that were with them, uh, and they are suffering enough with their loss of their best friend, and so it's we're grateful that we've been able to still maintain a connection and a relationship with them. Uh, and Jordy was a very active young man through his teens. He had some challenges. He was in a car accident that when he was 16 as a passenger and had concussion and some other bodily injuries, but that we seemed to focus on. But it was his head injury that really just made him quite a bit more impulsive and uh, just had him challenged. It just challenged him somewhat throughout his years, but he dealt well with it and became went to carpentry. He got his red seal. He had a construction business and was well respected and well loved throughout the community. But one thing that I think that head injury actually added to was his sensitivity to those who had other challenges in their life. He seemed to just have a natural um, uh, desire and a connection, and he could identify people. If he came into a room, he knew who needed a hug or an arm around them or help, and he was great with youth in terms of he would coach them, or he would just be there to support them uh, at whatever stage that they were at in or the things that they were dealing with. But he he was noted just for his kindness, his generosity, his willingness to help. If you were stuck on the side of the road, you'd hope that Jordy would be driving by, because he wouldn't drive by anybody without stopping to help him. And so he was uh, active, energetic, full of vim and vigor and excitement and adventure, but had a heart of gold.
Yeah, that he did. Kath, tell us a little bit about Jordy.
Well, loving people and loving fun were like some of his superpowers. Safety was not one of his superpowers, and he probably inherited that from his father. It wasn't number one or two or three. In fact, I don't think safety hit the top 10 or 20. And that was a hard thing, but it was who he was. Anyway, we love some of the stories. And the night before his funeral, we had last night on the trail, we have kind of a family ritual that when we've been on a main trip or a main hike, the last night we just have a time around a campfire or around whatever to share thoughts and feelings and testimony or growth or reflection. And so the stories that were told were so fabulous. We didn't really announce it far and wide because we didn't want people to feel like they had to come to this and the funeral the next day. But it really was wonderful, and people told some great stories. But one of the stories that we heard was of him going, driving a kid that he was maybe having on the job site with him for a few days, like mentoring him, whatever. And they're driving along and they see a guy without shoes. And Jordy pulled over and stopped and got out and gave the guy some money for shoes and gave him his lunch. And, that kind of story was, and then he drove further down the road, and then he pulled over and he just wept with this kid. And he said, that would be us if we didn't have someone in our corner. And, after his first head injury, and, he was still so much the same that there are people that thought, well, there's really no change, except that he had a harder time staying on task with certain things. And then, in fact, 3 months before his death, he had another head injury with a gun that exploded and caused him to have a concussion again. But why was I telling you that?
Well, I think the concussions did affect him in his decision making and his.
Totally, but yeah, excuse me. And I remember now. I wanted to tell you that he once saw this kid that used to drive him nuts because the kid lied about so much stuff, and years later he said the reason I had the head injury was so that I would learn to love Michael, and gave the guy's full name. And then he said, no, that wasn't why I had the head injury, but because I had the head injury, I learned to love him. And he was able to see that this kid would lie about something, but Jordy understood it in a way that he hadn't before. And he had compassion in a way that he didn't before. And I want to go back to one other thing. When we were raising kids and we had all these little kids, middle-aged kids, whatever, I said to Ted at one point, looking at their DNA, they're probably not going to be Rhodes Scholars. And they're probably not going to be Olympic athletes unless they really are determined and want to be one of those things. But they all have the potential to have great heart. And Mel, you know them. They all do have great heart. They're all committed to the communities where they live, to their families, to their friends. And what I like about that, and what I like about the opportunity to talk in your podcast, is is this idea that, I mean, here we are in the midst of the Olympics, and it is phenomenal to watch these athletes. But there's incredible value in being a member of community and being a contributing member of the community. And somehow I didn't use those words when I said that to Ted years ago, but really they all do have good heart. They all are part of community. And we've always loved being part of community. When I accepted Ted's proposal years ago, sitting on the steps at the Shuswap at the old family cabin, I knew that our life would be about family and about community and about our spiritual commitment, and it has been. And in the last years, we've also been very, very aware of how community has supported us in our times of need. And so if at some point you want to talk about that, I'd love to. So as I look back here on these thoughts, I love the fact that Jordy and the other kids have been so good at loving people. Like that's an incredible thing. And I love the fact that they are all part of community and that they value that.
Well, they had great role models. I feel really emotional talking about this, but I have never been at a funeral that had 700 people or however many people were there, and everybody thought that he was their best friend. Everybody did, and to have that kind of impact on your community, to have that kind of heart, I mean, that is a job well done, Mom and Dad. An amazing job.
He really lived. He lived for those people around him, and it's one of the things that would have been hard had he been on Earth the next 20 years. They had just announced they were expecting their first child, which was so exciting. And he was so thrilled about it. But I'm not sure how hard it might have been for him to learn that he couldn't stop and help the person on the side of the road because he had to get home. And so he really he lived fully his life of being single and being able to just do things.
Yeah. I remember you saying at one point that you thought, oh, if only I could keep him alive, or if only I could, you had mentioned the word 30.
Oh yeah, we thought.
Did you have that thought in your head? Like, was that a thing for you? Like, I have to get him past this hump.
No, not that we had to get him through, just that if he could make it to 30, he'd be okay. The brain injury, the head would be healing, the brain would be healing, his hormones would settle, and his decision making, his learning would have kicked in. And I thought, if we could just get him through to 30. And so every birthday, one of my kids at least would call and say, congrats, Mom. He's another year older, another year closer to 30. And then he turned 30, and 6 or 7 weeks later, he was dead. And I thought, oh, Ted, we should have been saying, if we can just get him through to 80.
Oh, yeah. That's so hard. How are you?
And as we talk about this, I need to acknowledge we're talking as Ted and Kath. I want to acknowledge his other family members who we cannot speak on behalf of, who we don't want to invade their space. So we're not going to speak about them except to say, I'm happy to say a few things. But one of them is, I don't think people realize how hard it is to lose a sibling. So that's one thing. Another thing is, people would say to me things like, oh, there's nothing worse than losing a child. and children shouldn't die before their parents. That should never happen. And I think on a, as a thanatologist, as a hospice palliative care nurse, I think that there are things that we just naturally feel. We just assume that our children will outlive us. But it just made me think, like, what planet do we live on if we think children don't die? And so I started keeping track, and I started adding up all the people I know who have had a child die. And I finally stopped when I was at over 100. Like, children do die before parents. And I think there's value in knowing that, because one, I just think there's value in us not saying that it doesn't happen. I think it's good for us to be prepared. I think it's good for us to value our kids. Because I'm a hospice nurse, we often have discussions about death at the dinner table or whatever. And about 10 days before he died, Ted and I were in a car with him, and we'd just been at a family something out in Souk. We were driving back. We had a fantastic conversation. I can't remember all the things we talked about, which I wish that I did. But the one thing that was said, I said, so if you die, this was in regards to his little one, if you die, then our mandate is, and I said it, and Jordy said yes. Well, imagine, we did not know then that within 2 weeks that he would be dead, but that mandate has stayed with us, and that has been so important for us to live that mandate. And so, we're coming up in a couple months to April, which is Advanced Care Planning Month in Canada and in other countries too. And the whole thing about having conversations about what happens and what do we want if we're dying or when we're dying, and what's important to us, da-da-da-da. Well, those are conversations we need to have. Not only do our kids need to have with us as adults, but we need to have with our children. Those are important things.
Yeah. What's great is just being able to see you guys talk about so many things that people don't talk about often. Right? And Ted, tell me, has this changed the way you thought about the importance of this business and the role that this business might have on helping other families through things like this?
Um, I guess we had been involved in the business long before Jordy passed, but I think it just solidified and made it real. I've lost parents and uncles and aunts and grandparents when I was quite young, but I think that it just helped me remember that that it is difficult, even though or you understand and have seen a lot of death, but it did help. I guess it just solidified that need or that desire to help those that feel that that sorrow and that grief, and that it's real, and that it comes and it goes in waves or at different times and different for your different people. But I think that having a strong faith-based community to rely on and to be with has helped. Be just believing and knowing where he's going, and that we'll have an opportunity to be with him again, and those kinds of things make it, I think, easier in some ways, but it's still it still hurts. It's not like it wipes everything away, um, but it just, I think, gives me a greater appreciation for my own life and for what I have. Although Kath would probably say, "Well, you don't do very much to protect it," but uh, I tend to take what I've been given and be grateful for what I've got. And we truly appreciated the time we had with Jordan and all that he brought to our family. Um, but we also um, hope that we can be a support to others that have to go through anything similar. And um, I've had the privilege of being beside Kath on numerous occasions when she's been at a bedside at 2 in the morning or midnight or whenever that need might arise, and those times are more just as Kath has been a friend. Kath has been someone that people knew that they could call on, and she's been able to be with it there with them and help them understand and and to provide some comfort and just some good care for these both the patient or the person and their family. It's usually the family that has the really the more um, psychological pain that you're dealing with and that grief than the person who's actually dying. And it's providing that setting where people can feel comfortable and feel open to react basically any way they want, and realize that there's anger, there's frustration, there's sadness, there's joy. You can be laughing 1 second about some of the things and the memories you have, and the next moment you're crying, and that is just putting life together, and but it's healthy, I think.
How do you guys have you noticed that you guys grieve in different ways?
Just a sec. Mel, do you want me to put something up on the window so that I don't have, because the light's going to come even worse in the next little bit? Is
Oh,
that a
sure.
problem?
Yeah. It sounded violent, didn't it, Ted?
Hey, yeah, you were ripping something out of there. Yeah. Sure, is she ripping off who's back?
Okay, that's probably better, eh?
Yeah, that is.
Okay.
Yeah, so have you guys noticed that you grieve in different ways?
Totally.
Tell me about that.
Totally. Well, there's theories about different styles of grievers, those who are intuitive, and one of the terms is intuitive versus instrumental. One is more feeling based, and let's talk about it. Let's talk with our friends about it. Let's write journals about it. Let's, play in that arena. And the other one is instrumental. And those are the people who want to, get the paperwork done, clean out um, do the task things. So if we talk about Ted and I, and traditionally, we see some people who are women who are more one way and men more the other way, though there's a real attempt to break down those gender stereotypes, and we're probably all somewhere on the continuum. And I think, in fact, one of the reasons I do all the education I do is because it's an instrumental way of making sense of and making purpose with the things that I've seen and suffered. But Ted, Geordie had a carpentry construction business, and so had tools and trucks and more tools and more stuff. And Ted was incredible at going and helping to tidy up the workshop and sell those items and get that money together for Jordy's wife, which was fabulous. It was incredible. And he and Jordy's mother-in-law did the taxes and the paperwork and all of that stuff. And Ted is so good at that stuff, and I'm like hopeless at it. And Ted was also good at talking about things and grieving, as in talking with people. But one of his ways of coping with anything is to do the work that's necessary.
Yeah.
And people sometimes have said things like, do you think it's going to be any easier for you knowing what you know? Thinking that because I'm a hospice palliative care nurse and a thanatology, which is someone who has a specialty in death, dying, and bereavement, do you think it'll be any easier? Which, of course, the person who asked it laughed, and I laughed, and in some ways, no, but in another way, there's a real benefit of knowing that we grieve differently, that every person in the family grieves differently, that his wife grieves differently, and that that's okay, and that we don't have to do it the same way. There's some people that worry that so-and-so hasn't gone to a support group, or they haven't talked about it, or they haven't cried about it, or whatever. But they are busy, actively engaged with commemorating the life of the person who died. So I think that knowing those things, like grieving differently, is helpful. Yeah. Ted?
Yeah, I think that, as you say, don't know if it makes it easier. I think it does in some ways, as I said before, just having that openness and that willingness to be vulnerable, basically, and just to be open and honest with where you're at and how you feel, and some of the things that are bothering you, and yet yes, I do tend to get engrossed in getting all the pieces of wood sold or whatever, or cleaned up the workshop, and but it was not that I really am that fastidious about having a clean workshop myself, because I've still got a bunch of his stuff in my workshop that I got to get rid of, right? I mean, there was lots that was earmarked for his son and family, and for other close people, and so I just I guess it's always been a part of our family. Kath has been so open that we have people come to our dinner table and get blown away sometimes, I think, just by the kinds of conversations that we have, and it's not that we make light of it, I don't think so much, but just that it's I think it's an important part of life that we should not be afraid of talking about, because if people know what we want, it makes it so much easier for the family if we'll actually talk about what we want.
And whether that's when we're grieving or whether that's when we're dying.
Yeah.
Same thing.
And
Yeah.
Thing is that hopefully Kath remembers what I might have said of what I want, because I can't remember. So, but yeah, I think it's all part of aging, and that we all feel like we're going to live kind of forever type of thing, and yet we never know when it's going to be our turn. And so it is important to have shared some of those thoughts. And it shouldn't be something that we're so scared of talking about, because it's so negative. I mean, this is life, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody is born and everybody's gonna die, and so to avoid even talking about it, I think is it doesn't have to be drab. I think it's important for children and family to know what is important to you.
Yeah. I find myself, I've noticed these feelings of when different people have died in my life uh, or community, sometimes you don't know what to say. And you don't. So I've noticed myself doing this. And so you avoid sometimes the conversations because you don't know what to say and you don't want to say something wrong. So, how would you say for people out there, like, what's the best way to support people that have gone through loss? I'm sure there's things you would say that are the best way to support, and then maybe some things not to do.
I think there's a website now that, and I can't remember the name of it. I'm sorry. That kind of is debunking this and saying, like, so what? Like, there's wrong things to say, but the important thing is to show up. And I want to go back to earlier thing, if you don't mind, when about what you say, and a lot of people would say, "Oh, you must be heartbroken and broken, and how heartbreaking this is." And for some reason, for the first couple of years, I had this really big deal. Like, no, we're not broken. No, we're wounded, but we're not broken. And I know that terminology around wounding and all of that, right? So I'd say, oh, we're wounded, but we're not broken. And I look back on it now and I kind of laugh because, and I blame it on Humpty Dumpty, because Humpty Dumpty falls off the wall and he falls on the ground and he breaks all up, and nobody, even the king's horses and all the king's men, can't put Humpty together again. And I was so determined we weren't broken. And I mean, there's beautiful scriptures, there's beautiful metaphors for a broken heart, and there's all this beauty around, an open heart and a broken heart. But at that time, like, I didn't want to use the word broken, because I thought, okay, you guys, we can get through this. Don't anybody else die in the next little while, but we can get through this, and we will get through this. And there's some good books on grieving and resilience. One is written by a woman named Lucy. It's on grieving and resilience, and she's out of New Zealand. And I can give you the thing on that, and you can put it up with your podcast. But I really believe that that death, as much as we've sat here talking, and I haven't cried at all about this, but there are times still now where I will have a good sob and I'll have a good cry, and that to me is just fine. But I do believe that hard stuff happens, and I believe that that's life, spelt with a capital L, capital I, capital F, capital E. We don't come to Earth to have, I don't know, Sunday school picnic, whatever that is, but we don't come to Earth for a picnic. We come to Earth for the full meal deal, the whole enchilada, and that includes hard stuff. So when we know that, then I think that also is easier. And when we also know, and when you ask about how to greet someone or how to support someone, I don't think we need to say, you're going to get through this. But I think that there's a point at which we need to hold a belief in our system that this person, that with community, that we can support this person, that this person will be okay, versus thinking that this life is over. So I think there's a benefit to thinking of resilience, and to remembering that we don't have to, be all smiles and cheery and, oh, things are going to get better. And because they don't, for a while they're going to get worse. I love some of the questions like, what can I do that's helpful today? Or I have Thursday afternoons free. It's good. You're on my calendar for the next month on Thursday afternoons. And I can do jobs, I can do lawn mowing, I can cook meals. Thursday afternoon's yours. Or I'm great with car and car maintenance. Here I am. Somebody showed up at our house and said, here's my truck. It's clean. It's ready to go. Keep it as long as you want. So I think we all have different things that we can offer. And sometimes it's just being there. I remember somebody came to our door. So Jordy died on a Thursday afternoon in Alberta. Friday was still just trying to let family know and all. And Saturday, people started arriving at the door. And one dear friend arrived and she had flowers. And so she walked in and she gave me the flowers and she was sitting next to me on the couch. And all of a sudden behind her came in somebody came in carrying a box of Kleenex. I don't know whose hand it was that was carrying the Kleenex, but I turned to my buddy and I said, now flowers are nice, but now Kleenex, now that is a good gift. And since then, and I have no idea who that was, but since then I have ordered cases because on Amazon, sending it across the country, you can't order just one box of Kleenex. So I've ordered a case of Kleenex for friends. I've given half a box of Kleenex to a friend because I thought we could share, the Kleenex, not dirty ones, but clean ones, And so I think at the end of the day, showing up, Mel, I think showing up is what's important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ted talked about forgiving or not forgiving or whatever, and I think it's good to just pull that one out too for a minute. We cared tremendously about the people Jordy was with because they were his buddies, and by virtue of who he was, the mandate would be that we would continue to. And from our spiritual background, that whole thing, years ago when something happened to one of our kids and our goal was not only to forgive, but to love the offender. And then, you're taught over the years the benefits of forgiveness. Mel, I don't know what it was. I don't know whether it was the years of trying that in the little things. And then when it was a big, huge thing, if that's what helped, or if it was a God-given blessing, I don't know. But one thing I will always be so grateful for is that neither Ted or I had a cell in our body that we wanted to lay blame. And I am so grateful for that because that could just be, I can't imagine. It was hard enough to lose Jordy. It was painful enough to lose him, but to be mad or angry, as much as we both love and adore that kid, like I said, safety was not on his list. And so to blame anybody, he was as much at fault as anybody. But I am forever grateful for that. So wherever people get their teachings, and all the world wisdom literature talks about forgiveness. And I think that is one thing that has been just such an important piece for Ted and I.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you guys have a tremendous amount of grace for everyone.
Years ago, I took a course on dying with grace, and I thought, who is going to think they can teach me to die with grace? It turned out it was really a course about ethics, but I thought if they think I'm going to lie back, I remember this woman I took care of, and she was wearing this pink nightie, and she looked so beautiful. And I went in and I said to her, I have a complaint. And she said, what? And I said, I have a complaint that you, a dying person, looks better than I look. And so when I was thinking about dying with grace, I was thinking about this, beautiful woman and thinking, well, that's not going to be me, believe me. And then the teacher taught this course on ethics and all. And she talked about having lost her child. And And the next day after the funeral, the father came and got her, and they went out on the little pond in a rowboat. This is how I picture it. And he said to her, "How are you doing?" And she says, "How do you think I'm doing? And where is God in all this?" And he said, "He's right here. He's right here." This woman went on and became an Episcopalian minister. And as she talked about grace, she defined grace as unmerited favor. And I've loved that. And I thought, okay. So if grace is about showing unmerited favor, I think maybe at this moment in time, maybe there's hope for me to learn to die with grace. And there's lots of ways. I love that word grace. I love the name grace. I love the word grace. Got some friends, we call ourselves the Graces. But I think that for all of us, there is in our lives that grace, that unmerited favor. It not only will it bless the lives of those we come in contact with, but it will certainly bless us. And I've lived with this man, your uncle, who has shown me such grace. We've been married now, Mel, 45 years, coming up 46 years. And it was actually this month, possibly even this day, that I met little Danny, your little brother, who was in hospital with leukemia, and your parents, and what great care they gave to him. And then meeting you and Karina, your little bodies, looking over the window into the room with him. There he was, 6 months old with leukemia. And there you two little people were. And being married into your family has taught me so much about grace and goodness and kindness.
I knew I wouldn't get through this without crying. But it's so nice to have conversations that elicit emotions. So many people are going through life without allowing themselves to feel much. And I see the amount that you guys have impacted, not only through your business, but through your family, through just your actions and how you conduct yourself. And you allow yourselves to feel. And in that, other people allow themselves to feel. Mm-hmm. And so this whole idea of this podcast, which I named Activate and Illuminate, I could not think of a better example. Yeah. All right. I'll get myself together. But tell us how you want Jordy to be honored.
Many of his friends and his cousins to this day, they will celebrate or honor or acknowledge his life on his death date by giving a jacket, getting a jacket, giving it away, or buying a bunch of hamburgers and taking them and giving them away. Or stopping and helping somebody. It is acts of service in some manner is what they will do to commemorate who he was. And so his influence and his impact is still alive and is doing good in the world.
Yeah, I love that. what would Jordy do statement that I've heard you guys say after. And there's going to be people that listen to this podcast that know nothing of this story, know nothing of this family, but are going to think after, what would Jordy do? In hearing that statement, what would somebody that like constantly did stuff for other people with reckless abandon,
Reckless abandon. Yeah.
abandon, what
Yeah.
would he do? And how can we do that a little bit more in our lives? Tell us.
And his little guy is now 5.5 years old. And if there's a dance, he puts his cowboy boots on, his cowboy hat, maybe. I'm not sure about that. And he is ready to tear up the dance floor. And he loves kissing girls already. And I'm going, what is this? A kissing gene or something? Anyway, I wish I hadn't said that. You could delete that one. But he just knows. He just wants to be a cowboy like his dad. And and what would Jordy do? He'd put on his cowboy boots. He'd show up. He wouldn't care. He'd create his own style. He might be cowboy boots and long shorts or shorter shorts and on the golf course, and just not keeping with any style that anyone's worrying about. And he would love you and love you some more. And he was like a service dog, like he would literally, he'd walk into a room and he could tell. He had an ability to figure out who had head injuries. I don't know how that happens. He could figure out who needed something, who was feeling lonely, who just needed somebody with them. And so I think for us all to, whether you put on cowboy boots or running shoes or whatever, but that ability to just reach out and cry with people, laugh with people, serve people, feed them hamburgers. A few years before Jordy died, as in a year before Jordy died, we had a family gathering, and one of the topics of around the campfire, if you can believe it, was if you could choose your last meal, what would it be? So people, chose some last meal. Well, Jordy's was, he'd go to McDonald's for this and Wendy's for that and whatever for this and A&W for that. And so in his truck, when it was getting cleaned out, there were some receipts from hamburgers from that morning. And of course, a bunch, not just one, but a whole bunch and they could be eaten cold for a few days, and I don't know if there's any meat in those anyway, so like you could eat them, maybe the rats in the car could eat them, like who knows. But he would feed whoever he could feed, and not only just feed them, but there was a guy downtown in Victoria that used to panhandle on the corner of Mackenzie and the highway. Now there's a roundabout there, sort of whatever, so it exchanged. So he moved, but Jordy used to call him Mackenzie Dan. But when he would see him, he would take him to dinner. But that wasn't just take him to dinner. That was visit with him and hear his story. And so he was the epitome of someone who just loved, and whatever that looked like, he was there. And he just showed up willing to love you no matter what you looked like. And no matter what kind of bad shape he was in, he would still figure it was his turn to show up and help out. And I think we're coming to the end of our time, but we can't sugarcoat this. He struggled with addiction. He struggled with mental health issues, and he was so proud of himself that he died that he lived sober for the last 7 years of his life. And somehow he had a knowing that when he tasted alcohol for the first time, that he was addicted, and and I thought, oh, you sweet little boy, you don't really know things about addiction, but I think he did. And it was one way of medicating his his be it ADD, be it head injury stuff, be it a whole bunch of stuff. And so can you imagine how pleased he was when he stopped drinking? So he really accomplished some incredible things. He accomplished some incredible things of learning to, I think probably learning to love himself. He married a beautiful woman who loved him, and they just loved each other passionately. And I think that was the other thing I was going to say earlier, when people would say there's nothing worse than losing a kid. And I thought, oh yeah, well, let me tell you, he's 30 years old. He was on his own, and our life did not revolve around him every day. Like, you want to compare that, if you want to compare scales of worse or whatever, just think about this incredible wife, the beginning of COVID, being a new mom, or new pregnant for the first time. Husband has died. And COVID sets in, and I think, oh yeah, I think there are some things harder than losing a kid. And what's important there isn't what is harder or what isn't. It's just knowing that there are hard things that happen on this planet. And I love your thought about the value of community, and how do we support one another. And I'm thinking you can chop some of this stuff out of here, but my goodness, lasagnas. There was a lasagna that was like, 10-pound lasagna that was delivered to us, and delivered again on year one and on year two. And people that came and just took over the kitchen, and family that arrived from all parts of the earth and that gathered. Like, community is incredible. The other thing, Mel, that I've just learned, I just want to put this comment in too. This year, on the anniversary of his death, I wondered about whether or not I would post on Facebook or not. And I decided I would do it. And I also was aware that there might be people going, oh, like, it's been 6 years or whatever. I wasn't worried about that, but I was aware that they might think, hasn't she gotten over this or whatever. Anyway, so I posted, and I had beautiful responses. And so then I wrote another posting about that decision to post. And it was incredible, the responses. And I thought about how we grieve in community. And I'm all about death literacy and grief literacy. But let me just make a comment about this, grieving in community. So at some point, for a second or a moment in time, people around the world that looked at that knew Jordy, for a moment in time, they were with Ted and me and Jordy and siblings and Shauna. Like, for just this little piece of time, they might have only clicked a heart or care or whatever, or they might have made a comment. But for a moment in time, they were with us. And I thought, I'll keep posting about Jordy.
Yeah, 100%. When you post about how much you feel, it allows other people to open a window into their, heart that they might not feel as often. Right? So when you post about things like this, and I think that social media isn't necessarily the best gauge of response. If you want to do it, do it. There will be people out there that feel more because of it. I don't think there'll ever be a time that someone, that it'll ever not be appropriate.
So thank you for having us reflect on love and our family and in our community. We are so grateful to live in community, and thankful to think about love in Jordy's life, and the value of community and of support and of love. And I think that Ted and I both would say, just, in terms of your question of what do you say or what do you do, worry less about that and just show up, and just sometimes just being together and silent. And you can even do that through text messages. Sometimes I'll send a text message to someone and I'll say hug, and then I'll just go down for a long while and a pause or a comma, and then I'll go again. Just, this is me sitting with you, thinking of you.
Yeah. Well, I wanted February to honor love, and not just in a trivial way. I've had different conversations about love from different capacities this month, but I could think of no better people to talk about love and the love and loss of a child, but that just embody this concept so fully. So thank you guys so much for giving us a glimpse into your life, into your heart, and into your love and into your loss.
Well, thank you, Melanie. Just as we were talking about that, I just flashed back to your first birthday. I was in Australia and sent you koala.
Yeah.
And again, just a little stuffy, but um, just connections, family, the importance of family and friends and community, and just showing and caring. And that can come through with just being there for somebody, or can be doing something special. But thank you for having us on, and uh, appreciate that opportunity, and do love you heaps.
Oh, thank you guys. Well, we'll end this here. We'll talk about that koala another time, Ted.
Yeah,
um,
Thank you, Melanie.
yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate this.
you take care.